Hi, everyone. Welcome to Adoption Awareness Live on this Thursday, April 28th, 12 noon Central Standard Time. We hope to do this every Thursday, and I'm going to try to get myself situated here. And hopefully be able to answer questions, address some topics that are near and dear to many people's hearts when it comes to adoption. And so today I thought we would start with bringing up the subject of adopting older children. I know that kind of jumps over talking about babies, but everybody wants a baby, right? But a lot of people have concerns, maybe some myths that hopefully we're going to clear up today. But people are hesitant to want to adopt an older child. And I can tell you from personal experience, as a professional, working in the field for 23 years, I had many, many families who came in initially telling me, I want to adopt a baby. Well, I worked at one agency. I was fortunate enough to do domestic adoptions, which is adopting babies, as well as state adoptions, where we had children who were legally free through the state of Texas for adoption. So I would have families come in wanting to sign up with the domestic adoption program, to adopt a baby. And we would meet monthly. I would have potlucks and we would talk, and we'd have a group of all these families who were on the, waiting to either be selected by a birth mom or I would try to match them up with a child to adopt through the state. And I had numerous families come to me at one point saying that they really felt that maybe a baby wasn't what they were supposed to be doing and adopting, but they had decided to adopt an older child. Now, an older child doesn't have to be a teenager, although there are many, many teenagers waiting to be adopted in foster care. But an older child obviously is a child that could be a toddler, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, elementary school age. So the ages, of course, vary. And then sometimes they'd even move on from not just an older child, but a sibling group. And we'll talk about sibling groups at another time. But I just wanted to cover today, and this is not going to take very long, but I do welcome your comments, your questions. This is your page. This is your time to jump on board and ask me any questions that come up during the course of our live time together, okay? So I have to put my glasses on because I did take some notes and pick up some things that I think are very important when it comes to adopting older children. One of the myths in adopting is that children will be eternally grateful to you for rescuing them from their terrible life. So, and that is something people I'm sure have thought about. I want to rescue a child. I'm sure they're going to love me and be well behaved, etc., etc. No child, the fact is that no child can be perfect enough to fulfill their expectation of being a grateful orphan. It's hard, I'm sorry, my phone is beeping. It's hard to believe that children who have endured abuse, famine, abandonedness, or institutionalization will ever be ungrateful. But the life that the child is living at least is familiar to that child. One thing to interject is that kids who come into the system who have been taken from their home of abuse, they think that's normal. If they've never compared what they've been through and gone to see a friend whose house is somewhat normal or maybe different from what they've experienced, if they have not gone through that, they think that what they're going through is perfectly normal. It's normal for mom and dad to fight and dad to beat mom. It's normal to see their parents doing drugs in the living room or watching porn or whatever. That's normal to them if they've never, ever seen the opposite, okay? But the life that the child is living is at least familiar. So even children who live in abusive or neglectful homes consider their home, and few would ever choose to leave. So that's something else to consider. We think, we think we're rescuing a child or if you adopt an older child, you feel like you're rescuing them. Well, people, believe it or not, as horrible as these kids will be treated at home, they still love their mom and dad. And that's going to be very hard to break through. But again, the kids, when they're ready to be adopted, they go through kind of a osmosis, and they learn things, and they go to counseling, and but there's still going to always be, I believe, a small portion in their heart of love, or maybe what could have been. So to think that you might be rescuing a child, you're not really doing them a favor, believe me. But there'd be many of us who'd be so grateful to our neighbors who brought us food when we were ill, and that we would be graciously turn our lives over to their control because maybe we didn't have what they had. But altruism by itself is not a good reason to adopt, so keep that in mind. Another myth is that all these children need is love and a good home, and they'll be fine. Well, let me tell you, that's a myth. The fact is that most available children, both in the U.S. and abroad, will have adoption issues that love, a good home, quote unquote, alone cannot fix. Regardless of how good the new homes are, they will have to work through fears and anger related to abandonment and rejection. These fears and anger often surface during the teen years as adopted children attempt to form an identity and struggle to decide which qualities of both families to retain. Okay? Now it's true, love does conquer all, but love is also, there's a scripture that says love covers a multitude of sins. So in dealing with children who have been adopted, especially older children, and this can happen even if you adopt a baby, so please keep this in mind. They become adults, they become teenagers actually, and eventually become adults. So they're going to have questions in their adoption process, but keep in mind, loving unconditionally, accepting this child, good, bad, and ugly, is eventually going to reap some rewards, okay? It's not an easy process. It's not. And like I said, going back to the first myth, you're not doing a child a favor by adopting them. You're not rescuing them, okay? So keep those in mind. Now, the next myth is most of these kids will never recover from their abusive experiences. They will never attach to their new families and will grow up to become criminals. Well, let's talk about what the facts are. While some children are indeed so damaged by long-term abuse or neglect that they will never overcome their legacy of pain and violence, most of these kids will attach to their new families and become productive adults. You do, however, need to educate yourself thoroughly about the effects of long-term abuse and or neglect, multiple foster care placements, or life in an institution before you even begin the process to adopt. Read as many books as possible. Of course, the internet is great for things like this. And also talk to as many people as you can who have adopted older children. I can tell you in the years of that I've spent in dealing with foster kids and people coming in to foster and or adopt, there's a lot of training involved in this process. You are not going to be left alone. You are not going to have to do this by yourself. So keep in mind that you have support. And again, the suggestions made about reading books, talking to people who have adopted older children, those are great. Those are great suggestions. You want to empower yourself. You don't want to come into this blindly because of the goodness of your heart. You want to love a child. I think that's great. That's noble. But there's more. There's more you have to do. Get yourself, informed and empowered to know what kids go through in foster care and to understand the whole process, okay? Another myth is that the risk of attachment problems rises proportionately with the age of the child at adoption. This is not necessarily the case, and here's the fact about that. If an older child formed a strong attachment to a primary caregiver in infancy and remained in his birth family or with one foster family for several years before being adopted, he may have less chance of reactive attachment disorder than a baby or toddler who has spent the first 9 months to 2 years in an orphanage or a series of foster homes and who never forms a primary attachment. What is true is that most older children have likely been abused and or neglected either before or after their relinquishment. Their risk of attachment difficulties depends on the strength of their initial attachments and their individual circumstances and personality. The quality of care, in the institution or foster homes that your child was in plays a large part in his ability to carry forward an early attachment. In orphanages with minimal staff and few toys or one-on-one interactions, the child will learn to depend mostly on himself to meet his needs. Repeated moves can make children exceptionally fearful of trusting and loving anyone again. It's important to get as much information as you can about your child's early years. I used to do trainings with families on attachment. And I'm not a professional in regard, I was a professional in social work, but I was not an expert in reactive attachment disorder. But the story mentioned here about children, particularly in Romania, Ukraine, places like that where there might be 50 to 100 babies in cribs in a room, the likelihood of them getting one-on-one attention and being nurtured is very slim. So what these children do learn at a very young age, because trust is a very important element, something that develops very early in children's minds when they're young. If they're not getting nurtured, if they're not being touched and coddled and smiled at, held, these children learn at a very young age that the only person they can trust is themselves. I know you might find that hard to believe, but it is so, so true. I met a little guy. He was born and raised in foster care. He went into foster care when he was about 6 months. He stayed in foster care in one home for quite a while. And mom was pregnant with another child, and she would come and visit him. Well, this little guy, when he was about a year, 12, 14 months old, he was walking already, and I'll never forget this as long as I live. Mom came to see him and held her hands out for him to come near her, and he had this big smile on his face. But as soon as it registered in his head that this was his mom, his birth mother, he made a beeline in the other direction. He did not go to her. Why is that? Because he formed his attachment to his foster mom. He obviously at birth with this mother, she did not form an attachment with him at all. So he had already learned, I can't trust her. I can't trust my mom, my birth mom. So, but he was still young enough where he formed an attachment with his foster mom. And it was a beautiful thing to see, but it was heartbreaking to see his response to his birth mom when she finally came to visit him. And she waited a long time to visit him, which was dangerous for her because it took a long time for her to try to build a relationship with her son. When she finally did one time come in and try to hold him, and I mean, she held him very tightly at this one particular visit, I'll never forget. He screamed so loud, like he was in pain, and he was ripping at her neck, trying to get away from her, and she was rocking him. I'm not kidding, he was screaming bloody murder. He did not want to be with his mother. And all of us who were observing this had to leave. We had to walk out of the room to allow some time for mom and the baby, but we could hear this little guy screaming on the other side of the building. And this was a pretty long single floor building, but pretty long, pretty big. And people were running over, the staff was running over asking, what's happening? What's going on? Because we thought this child was in serious pain. However, he cried for about 10 minutes. She was rocking him the whole time. He stopped because he was exhausted. He rested his head on her shoulder. But as soon as he regained some energy, he started again. And it was just so hard to hear, so hard to listen to. I mean, so hard to watch. We could not be in the same room with this child. And she knew she had a lot of work ahead of her to try to break this attachment disorder that he was already forming at a very young age. And he was only attached to his foster mom. So this is not to scare you people. Please understand. It's just really to educate and to help you to do more research when it comes to any age that you're wanting to adopt, okay? But I highly encourage older child adoptions, and there's one reason why I say this. As a case manager back in the day, I had kids that I just fell in love with that were pre-adolescent or adolescent or teenagers, and they wanted to be attached to somebody. They became attached to me, which was not a good thing. And of course, I had my boundaries. I only, I'd take them out for ice cream, hang out at the school with them. Never brought them home. Never did they have my cell phone number. But a relationship obviously was built during the time that I had some of these kids on my caseload. And it broke my heart because I would strongly advocate for people to adopt these children or other children that were teenagers because, they want love. They want love as badly as the babies need love. And we want to give love, obviously, because the babies are so cute and cuddly. But when kids get older, they're not so cute and cuddly anymore. But if you can look past some of the issues that some of these kids have, be challenged, and also pray about what does God want you to do in this situation. Because I had several couples, like I said, that started off wanting babies, but in the process they changed, and eventually I placed some older kids in these particular families' homes, and they did really well, and they're still doing well. And that was probably 13, 14 years ago, and they're still doing well. So it's about informing yourself, educating yourself, talking to other people that you know who have adopted older children. Look on the internet, do some research. It's very important for yourself to know what you're getting into. And when you see a child through the Heart Gallery or on the internet somewhere or through the agency that you're working with, if you see a child or two that sparks your interest, do a little bit of research on them if you can. Ask the caseworker or the social worker as much information as you can and are able to get back so that you can understand what this child or children have been through. Okay, make informed decisions. Don't go into this blindly. Do what you can to get as much information as you can. Okay, and I thank you, viewers, for popping in. I really do. I don't have that many right now, but this will be end up being videoed, and so people I know who want to look at it can check it out later. And I hope that this does bring some questions. If you have other questions after watching this video, please write your comments down. I'll be happy to respond to you either privately. I do have an email address for Adoption Awareness. It's adoptionawareness@hotmail.com. adoptionawareness@hotmail.com. So if you want to write me privately, feel free to do that. You can private message me. Like I said, there's ways to reach me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay? So again, I thank you, and I hope to do this every Thursday at noon. And hopefully we will have other viewers on to ask questions if things pop up. I want to talk more about this. So I have people who are interested in wanting more information, I can bring this up again next week, or we can cover a brand new topic related to adoption. So let me know, okay? I like your feedback. I need it. This is your page, and I want to do what you all feel would be important to you, okay? So take care. God bless, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.